안녕하세요.
The morning sun shone brightly over Seoul, reflecting off the imposing facade of SH Group, one of South Korea's largest conglomerates. At the top of the glass skyscraper, in a luxurious office with a panoramic view of the city, Kang Ji-hoon, the company's billionaire CEO, flipped through documents with his usual unshakable expression. Known for his cold demeanor in business and calculating behavior, he rarely diverted his attention from corporate matters. To Ji-hoon, emotions were an unnecessary distraction. On the ground floor, Han Sua, a determined and talented young woman, was beginning her first day as an employee in the company's design department. Coming from a humble family, she had fought hard to earn this opportunity. With a degree in graphic design from a public university, Sua spent years juggling studies and worked to support her mother and younger brother. Now, she had finally secured a position at one of the country's most prestigious companies. Holding a clipboard in her hands and a glimmer of excitement in her eyes, she crossed the grand lobby, unaware that fate had already begun to weave an unexpected path for her. The SH Group headquarters was a true temple of corporate power. The frenetic movement of executives, the rapid clacking of keyboards, and the flawless shine of the glass elevators made Sua feel like she had stepped into a completely different world. She took a deep breath, adjusted her bag on her shoulder, and walked forward with confidence for her first day. But no matter how prepared she was, she could not foresee what would happen next. As she headed to the floor where she would be working, a small accident occurred. Distracted by an email from her supervisor, Sua collided with a tall and imposing figure. The impact was enough to send folders and documents flying in all directions. When she looked up, her heart skipped a beat as she realized who it was: Kang Ji-hoon, the CEO himself. His expression was unreadable, but his sharp eyes seemed to analyze her coldly. "Do you always walk without looking ahead?" His deep and controlled voice echoed through the corridor. Sua swallowed hard, quickly kneeling to gather the scattered papers. "I'm so sorry, sir. It wasn't my intention. Her words rushed out as she scrambled to organize the documents on the floor. Ji-hoon watched her closely. Unlike everyone else around him, she did not seem afraid of him, just visibly embarrassed. Her gaze was sincere, and her hands trembled slightly. Something about her intrigued him, but he quickly dismissed the thought. Bending down, he picked up one of the papers and handed it to her, never taking his eyes off her flushed face. "Be more careful next time," he said, straightening up with firm steps and walking away without looking back. Sua let out a sigh of relief as soon as he was gone, never imagining that this small incident would mark the beginning of a story that would change both their lives forever. As she organized the papers, a few marketing department employees whispered among themselves. "She actually bumped into the CEO and lived to tell the tale," one of them murmured, giggling. "They say he has no patience for mistakes. If it were any of us, we'd probably be fired by now," another replied. Sua simply lowered her head and continued to her department. However, what she didn't know was that in the days to come, Ji-hoon would find himself involuntarily watching her. Was it just curiosity, or was it something more? In the following days, Kang Ji-hoon found himself watching Han Sua without realizing it. In the middle of tedious meetings with directors, between sips of coffee and reading reports, his eyes would wander to the employee in the design department. She was dedicated, worked without distractions, and didn't seem to care about the office gossip. Ji-hoon couldn't understand why he felt this unexpected curiosity. He was never a man to be distracted by emotions, yet something about her intrigued him. On the other hand, Sua tried to forget the embarrassment of her first encounter with the CEO. To her, it was nothing more than an unfortunate incident she hoped wouldn't jeopardize her job. Working at SH Group was her biggest dream, and she wanted to stay far away from corporate gossip or intrigue. However, it didn't take long for her to notice that the CEO's gaze crossed hers more often than normal, and that made her nervous. The situation escalated when Ji-hoon, without realizing it, ended up at a cafe near the company at the exact same time as Sua. He wasn't the type of man to frequent casual places, but he needed a break from the office to clear his mind. Upon entering, he spotted Sua selecting a drink, and before he could rationalize his actions, He found himself standing in line behind her. "Two of the same drink, please," he suddenly said, surprising her. Sua turned around quickly, her eyes wide. "Mr. Kang, what are you doing here?" Ji-hoon cleared his throat, realizing that his action had been somewhat impulsive. "I need caffeine, and you seem to have good taste." She blinked, unsure of how to respond. The CEO had just paid for her coffee. The surrounding customers had already turned their attention toward them. Sua felt a chill run down her spine. This would definitely become office gossip. "You don't have to pay for my coffee," she tried to argue, to no avail. "It's not a problem," he replied, picking up both cups and handing one to her. That simple interaction made Sua's heart beat faster. However, neither of them knew that this small moment would not go unnoticed. Someone from the company had already taken a photo of them together, and the first spark of rumors was about to spread. The next day, the company corridors were filled with whispers and curious glances. Ji-hoon and Sua were now at the center of attention, and this could become a problem. The next morning, the atmosphere at SH Group was different. In the hallways, whispers spread rapidly, curious glances were exchanged, and phone screens lit up with messages. The moment Sua stepped into the office, she felt the weight of everyone's attention on her. Her stomach churned. Something was definitely wrong. "Sue, have you seen this?" her colleague Mi-jin asked, pushing her phone toward her. On the screen, there was no room for doubt. It was a photo of her and Kang Ji-hoon at the cafe, both holding identical cups. The caption suggested something scandalous. "The cold and impenetrable CEO melts for an employee?" Sue felt her heart race. How had this happened? Who could have taken that photo? Meanwhile, on the upper floor, Ji-hoon stared at his phone, analyzing the same image. His face remained expressionless, but internally, he was furious. SH Group had strict rules about workplace relationships, and any hint of involvement could be seen as favoritism. More than that, he knew his family and the company's board would not be pleased with such speculation. Before he could react, his phone rang. It was his stepmother, the influential and calculating Madame Kang, a woman who did everything in her power to control his life and future. "Ji-hoon, what is this nonsense?" Her cold voice cut through the receiver. "Do you even realize what you're doing? This is a scandal," he sighed, rubbing his forehead. "It's just a misunderstanding, Omonum. Nothing to worry about." "Nothing to worry about? If you don't handle this, the board will intervene. We are already discussing your engagement to the Choi family's daughter. This cannot interfere with our plans." Ji-hoon's fists clenched. Once again, his life was being treated as a business transaction. But this time, for the first time, he felt something different, a genuine discomfort with this imposed fate. While Ji-hoon fought his own battle, Sua tried to stay under the radar, but she couldn't avoid being summoned by management. Inside a meeting room, her supervisor and the head of HR stared at her with serious expressions. "Han-soo, we hope you understand the gravity of this situation. The company values the professional image of its employees," the HR manager began. "This kind of rumor could harm both your career and the company's reputation." Sua felt a tightness in her chest. She hadn't done anything wrong. But before she could defend herself, the door swung open and Ji-hoon stepped inside. His commanding presence silenced the room. "This meeting is unnecessary," he declared, his sharp gaze fixed on the managers. "There is no reason to penalize Miss Han for baseless speculation." The managers exchanged hesitant looks. It was rare for the CEO to intervene in matters like this. "But Mr. Kang, the issue is that." "Issue resolved?" he interrupted firmly. "I don't want to hear any more rumors about this." Sua's heart pounded. Why was he doing this? Why was he defending her so strongly? Ji-hoon had made his decision, but now he would have to deal with the pressure from both the board and his family. Meanwhile, Sua couldn't shake the question, why was he getting so involved? After the incident at the office, the atmosphere at SH Group remained heavy. Although Ji-hoon had officially shut down the rumors, curious glances still lingered on Sua. Every time she walked through the hallways, she could feel the whispers growing louder. Despite the discomfort, she kept her head high. She didn't want anyone to think she was receiving special treatment from the CEO, but she knew that no matter what she did, the speculation wouldn't die down so easily. Meanwhile, Kang Ji-hoon was facing a bigger problem. The company's board had called for an urgent meeting. When he entered the massive conference room, he was met with stern expressions from the shareholders. And at the center of it all, his stepmother, Madam Kang, leading the opposition against him. Kang Ji-hoon, you need to understand that this company is not a toy for your emotions. Her voice was cold and calculated. If you continue with this attitude, we may have to reconsider your position as CEO. Ji-hoon remained firm. And exactly what attitude am I taking? Drinking coffee? Because if I'm not mistaken, that's what I'm being accused of. The shareholders exchanged tense glances, but Madam Kang did not back down. You know what we're talking about. The engagement with the Choi family's heiress is essential for the company's future. You cannot allow an employee to interfere with SH Group's plans. Ji-hoon clenched his fists under the table. It was always like this. To his family, he was never a person, just a name to be used for business alliances. If the company's stability depends on my marriage, then perhaps we are weaker than I thought. His voice was cold and calculated. I will not make personal decisions based on fear of gossip. Madam Kang pressed her lips together, visibly displeased. But Ji-hoon knew this was far from over. Later that night, Soo-ah decided to clear her mind. She went to a small park near her home, where she could breathe without feeling prying eyes on her. But to her surprise, she found Ji-hoon there, sitting on one of the benches, gazing at the illuminated city. Mr. Kang? She hesitated as she approached. He lifted his gaze and gave her a small, tired smile. If you're going to call me Mr. Kang all the time, I'd rather you just ignore me. Soo-ah blinked, surprised by his informality. Sorry, Ji-hoon-si. The words came out hesitantly, and he seemed pleased. A comfortable silence settled between them, the only sound being the wind rustling through the trees. Finally, Ji-hoon sighed. I know all of this has been difficult for you, and I'm sorry for that. Soo-ah gave a small smile. I don't want to be a problem for you. If you want me to stay away... Ji-hoon cut her off with an intense look. What if I don't want you to stay away? Soo-ah's heart pounded. For the first time, she realized she was standing before a man who was truly willing to challenge everything for what he felt. Now Ji-hoon must decide if he is ready to face even greater consequences for his feelings, while Soo-ah must decide if she is willing to take the risk of standing by his side. The next morning brought new storms. As soon as Ji-hoon arrived at the company, his assistant informed him that Madam Kang had called a press conference. His heart pounded. He knew it was a damage control attempt, but he feared what she had planned. In the SH Group's auditorium, journalists waited eagerly. On stage, Madam Kang sat with a rehearsed smile and picked up the microphone. I appreciate everyone's presence. I would like to clarify the unfounded rumors that have been circulating. My stepson, Kang Ji-hoon, has always been committed to the company's future, and for that reason, it is with great pleasure that we announce he will proceed with the arranged marriage to the heiress of Choi Enterprises. The room exploded with flashes and murmurs. Ji-hoon arrived just in time to hear his stepmother's words echoing through the speakers. His blood boiled. That is not going to happen. His voice cut through the commotion. The journalists turned to see him walking onto the stage. Madame Kang maintained her composed expression, but her eyes burned with fury. Hoon, we are in the middle of an important announcement. This is not the time for impulsiveness. Her voice was low and cutting. He took the microphone and turned to the journalists. I want to make something clear. I will not be forced into a marriage of convenience. And more importantly, I want to live my life as I choose. He paused, and in front of everyone declared, I love Han-soo-ah. The room fell into absolute silence. Shock was written across everyone's faces, including Soo-ah's, who was watching from her desk in the office through the live broadcast. The impact was immediate. Madam Kang stood up abruptly, gripping the microphone tightly. You are making a mistake, Ji-hoon. This could cost you your position in the company. He met her gaze, unwavering. Then let it cost me. I will not trade my happiness for money or status. In the SH Group offices, employees watched in stunned silence. Sua covered her mouth with her hands, unable to believe what she had just heard. Ji-hoon was willing to lose everything for her. Before she could process it, her phone vibrated. It was Ji-hoon. "Are you watching me right now?" His voice sounded relieved, but there was still a hint of nervousness. "Ji-hoon, you just challenged your family in front of the entire country." Her voice was a whisper, still in shock. "Because I had to. Because you deserve someone who will fight for you." He took a deep breath. "Can we meet?" Sua felt her eyes welling up. She knew Ji-hoon's decision would change everything. Now that Ji-hoon has declared his love publicly, the consequences will be even greater. Is Sua ready to face it all by his side? Ji-hoon's revelation sent shockwaves through S.H. Group. The media wouldn't talk about anything else, and the shareholders were divided. Some supported the young CEO, while others pressured him to resign. But Ji-hoon stood firm. He would not back down. Across the city, Sua was still trying to process everything that had happened. The most powerful man she knew had risked everything for her. And now, could she truly return that love without fear of the consequences? By late afternoon, Ji-hoon appeared in front of the small apartment where Sua lived. No bodyguards, no luxury cars, just him, a man in love and determined. When she opened the door, she found Ji-hoon more vulnerable than she had ever seen him. "I have nothing left to lose, Sua, but I know that if I lose you, then everything will have been for nothing." He gently held her hands. "Do you want to stand by my side, no matter what happens?" Sua took a deep breath. Every doubt and insecurity flashed through her mind in seconds. But as she looked into Ji-hoon's eyes, she knew the answer. "Yes." Her voice was steady. "I want to be by your side." A genuine smile lit up Ji-hoon's face before he pulled her into a tight embrace. In that moment, nothing else mattered. The following months were challenging. Madame Kang tried everything to destabilize Ji-hoon, but his love and determination proved stronger. He found support among shareholders who valued his modern vision for the company, and over time, the board finally accepted his leadership without the condition of an arranged marriage. Then, in an intimate yet deeply meaningful ceremony, Ji-hoon and Sua got married. It wasn't an extravagant event, but a sincere moment, surrounded by those who truly supported them. As he held her hand at the altar, Ji-hoon knew he had made the right choice. Happiness wasn't in the empire he had inherited, but in the woman he had chosen. Years later, on the balcony of their home, Ji-hoon gazed at the small baby sleeping in Sua's arms, their child, their new beginning. He smiled, feeling, for the first time, truly complete.